Hey, what's up guys? Alex here with a new video, and today we're going to be doing my first impressions on my copy of the Sony 50mm f1.2 G Master. If you're new to the channel, I am a portrait photographer based out of Orlando, Florida, and I just recently switched over to the Sony system. Earlier this year, I compared this lens with the Canon RF 51.2, and I discovered that both lenses are absolutely incredible. They have some differences, and we'll talk about it here later in this video when I talk about image quality, but both of them just blew me away. If you're also familiar with the channel, I have said that the Canon RF 51.2 was my favorite lens of all time. It was my ride or die, my desert island lens, the lens I use for everything. When I shot weddings, I use that lens 90% of the time. I can actually probably use it 100% of the time and be totally happy with it. But now that I'm shooting Sony, I had to pick up the 51.2, and I used it for the first time with a shoot this past weekend, and I wanted to talk about it. I normally break these videos down into 3 parts: autofocus, build quality, and image quality. For this one, we're gonna skip a few parts. Build quality, it's a G Master lens, it's built like a tank, it feels great. To recap it, it's a $2,000 lens, and it feels like it. I also have to note that out of the big 3, what I mean by that is the Sony version, the Canon version, and the Nikon version. The Sony version is the smallest, followed by the Canon, and then the Nikon lens is just on a league on its own. It's massive. So there goes build quality. Autofocus, I don't know what to tell you. With the new Sony cameras, I'm talking about the a7 IV and the FX3 I'm shooting with right now, this lens does not miss. It nails focus every single time. It's practically automatic, and it works. Image quality. How do I say this? How do I break it down? This lens is optically perfect. I said it. I have 0 complaints. So let's do this. I'm gonna go ahead and play a slideshow of images that I took with this lens over the weekend. Then we'll come back and we'll do an image breakdown where we'll go into Lightroom and see the images up close so you can see what I'm talking about. I will also note all the images you're about to see have been edited with my preset, which is available in the link in the description below. So if you want the look, check it out. I'll stop talking. Let me go ahead and roll the slideshow. All right, what did you guys think? Weren't those images great? I want to go ahead and do a deep dive now in Lightroom and pixel peep some of these images so you can see why I think this lens is optically perfect. But before we do that, a word from today's sponsor, Skillshare. If you are unfamiliar, Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes. With Skillshare, you can find classes to invest in yourself and learn a new skill. I recently took the class Street and Documentary Photography, The Ongoing Moment by Andre Wagner. If you're not familiar, Andre's an incredible photographer based out of NYC.
As street photographers, we all see like, oh, like I want to shoot that or that one person or something that's happening, but we constantly have to be surveying everything that's happening around it, so we're properly framing the shots and we're actually getting what we want, and we're not just putting everybody smack dead in the center of the frame. You know, you want to kind of stretch that frame out and really tell that story and express that image in a way, you know, that really works.
If you want to get started on street photography and learn from an inspiring photographer like Andre, this class is for you. Because Skillshare is sponsoring today's video, the first 1,000 people to use my link in the description down below will get their first month free. Thank you, Skillshare, for sponsoring today's video. All right, guys, I have Lightroom open. Let's go ahead and do a deep dive. So here on my first image, The reason why I chose this image here is the sun is directly above my model. Now, like I mentioned, I used to shoot with a Canon RF 51.2. When you had the sun directly hitting the lens would create a red haze over the image. It would also lose a bit of contrast. Now, some people would call that character, and it is a look of its own. And once you have that lens and you know how to use it, you know when that's gonna happen, you know how to work around it. But I was shocked when I was in this particular instance and the lens did not flare. There is no lens flare in this image, there's no loss of contrast. And when you zoom into 100%, this image is tack sharp. You're not losing any contrast, you're not getting any purple fringing, and it looks incredible. If you look in the top, you do see where the sun is creating a bit of a haze. And unlike other lenses where it impacts the entire image, it looks like the haze here only impacts the area where that bright spot is, which is right here in the top. Overall though, incredible image, and I'm just blown away at the fact that it's not flaring. The next image, when we look at it, I was able to get a little bit of a flare. This is as much as you're gonna get. You can see it here kind of peeking out, a pretty cool small looking flare. But again, what's impressive is if you look at the image, it's still tack sharp. There is no loss of contrast, and there is no haze all over the entire image, even though the sun is directly hitting the lens. That just completely blew me away. Again, let me actually put my settings up here. Both those images, and actually all the images you're seeing, were shot at 1.2. So this is wide open. Looking at the background blur, it is just absolutely creamy and beautiful, and wow. Let's look at a few more images. For this image, it's actually one of my favorite ones. I don't know why I really like this pose and this look. Again, I positioned her right behind the sun, and when you zoom into this photo at 100%, you see how much detail there is, how much sharpness there is at 1.2. Again, the sun is right here to the right side, and there is absolutely no purple fringing on this image, even though it's a very high contrast situation. No haze, and just look at that. It's absolutely gorgeous. The background just melts. Let's move on. Let's go to the next one. This one is not necessarily a challenge as far as lighting goes. Just, I thought I really enjoyed this image. I like how the trees kind of wrap her around, how she's looking up. Zooming in, again, you see at 100%, this is tack sharp. This image though, let's point it out. The camera actually nailed focus on her lips and not her eye, because you can see that the sharpness is down here in her mouth and not necessarily on her pupil. Looking at it from a regular distance, you can never tell. Pixel peeping always kind of shows you imperfections that 99% of the people won't notice, but we're photographers. This is what we do. Let's go to the next image. This image is pretty cool. I mentioned I'm in Orlando, Florida, which means it'll randomly rain, regardless of how the sky looks. So here we have a beautiful sun in the background, and it started raining. Gotta love it. Zooming in, you can see that the raindrops here on the side actually kind of delivered a pretty cool picture. But again, I want to point out that the sun is directly behind her. She's backlit. She's still contrasty, no purple fringing, and tack sharp at 1.2. I love this image. It looks great. All right, let's carry on. Let's go to a closer portrait here. And here we have another image. This one, I did do some editing on her face. I don't usually do a lot of skin smoothing, but again, this is a sharp lens at 1.2, which means it's gonna show all the imperfections. Zooming in here though, super light edit like I said. The skin still has texture. If you're interested in how I edit my skin tones and my photos, let me know and I can do a video on that. But for this image, just look at that. Tack sharp on the eye. You can start seeing that the other eye is already getting blurry because of the 1.2. And absolutely gorgeous portrait. Another good one here, if we go to this one, laying on the grass, you can see how the foreground is already blurry because of the 1.2. Obviously the background is melted away. Zooming in, just look at that image. And I gotta point it out, look, I was not able to get this lens to show me any purple fringing or any kind of imperfections. As a matter of fact, looking through all the images, there's actually one where I saw a little bit of fringing, and this one I actually shot underexposed. I really wanted to preserve the sky, so there's a lot of editing on this one. Zooming in, you see how sharp and how beautiful this looks. But you do see here, there is a super small amount if you pixel peep here on the edges. But that's the only time I was able to see it, so that's crazy. Let's go ahead and show you one more image and kind of wrap things up. Let's finish with this one, the prayer pose. Again, zooming in, just look at that detail. You know, some people would say this lens is clinical, but I still think the rendering of this lens is absolutely beautiful. Even though there really is no imperfections on it, this rendering is, I mean, just look at it. I'm in love with this lens already. And yes, it is sharp, and yes, it has tons of detail. Does that make it clinical? I think by definition it does. That doesn't mean it's not a pleasant image. But let's go ahead and wrap up my thoughts on this lens. So there you go. You saw the images, we pixel peeped. This lens, in my opinion, is the most perfect 50mm lens on the market. Like I said, I used the Canon RF 51.2 for 4 years and it was glued to my camera. That lens was incredible. I knew its shortcomings and I knew how to work around it. This lens, it's hard to say there's any shortcomings. The only thing I will say is if you want a lens to flare, if you want a lens with a little bit of character, this is not it. But if you want a lens that, again, I personally think is optically perfect, incredibly sharp, wide open. I mean, you can use this lens wide open 24/7 and not have any compromises. Great build quality. I mean, it does not get better than this. I don't know how you make a better lens. Now, if you do want character and imperfections, another option you have is adding filters on it. You can add a Pro Mist filter, a Cinebloom filter. You can add an effect filter. That can cause the light to bend and give you different looks. But when you remove it, you still have that optical perfection. And that's a good compromise because with other lenses, you can't remove it, right? So if a lens flares, it flares. There's nothing you can do about it. With this one, you have the option to add a filter or add something like that to add that character and remove it when you don't need it. With that being said, I can strongly recommend this lens for any Sony shooter. The minute I started using it, I realized this lens is gonna be glued to my camera. I can't wait to see how it performs with the A7R5 and the 61 megapixel sensor because with the A7 IV, it blew me away. But what do you guys think? Let me know down in the comments below. If you shoot Sony, have you tried the 51.2? Have you used it? If you shoot any other system, have you used that 51.2 for that native mount? Let me know. I personally love this focal length. I love the 1.2. And again, if you've seen my channel, you know why. With that said, guys, hopefully you enjoyed this video. As always, please like, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Have a good one, guys. Peace.